everyone. This is Diane Rasmussen with UK Column. I'm really happy to be joined today by Bonnie Wallace, who is way over in Texas on the other side of the pond, but she's been doing some amazing work over the past little while on exposing the sexual content that is unfortunately present in the library books in public and school libraries on both sides of the pond. And as our viewers will know, I've been doing some reporting on this with different groups in both countries for some time. And I think Bonnie has some exceptional stories to tell about what she's discovered, what she's done, where her successes have been. So there is some positive news in this recording today. And just to kind of see what we can do from here, locally, nationally, and around the West, where these books are being placed in front of children inappropriately everywhere. So, Bonnie, thank you so much for joining me today. Welcome to UK Column. It's great to have you on the show. If you maybe want to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you discovered what is actually being placed in front of our children at this point in society.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I would love to share my story. I'm 58. I was just a stay-at-home mom. My daughter graduated from Llano High School. And in 2019, so I didn't do much. I was an empty nester. My husband and I traveled a lot, often to England and Scotland and Ireland and other places. And one day in June of 2021, someone asked me in my community. So Llano is a small town. We have about 3,000 people that live here. Very rural, like from my house, I can't even see another house. So kind of just rural country kind of area, very conservative. And a lady said, "Have you seen the bad books that are in the library?" Oh, I haven't. I haven't heard of them. And she said, "Well, I found some and you need to look," and, kind of opening my eyes. But she didn't give me the names of any, and she didn't really go into much detail. And so a couple of months were passing by, and there was more and more kind of whispers about it in our community. And then I was getting my hair cut in November of 2021. And the lady that was cutting my hair said, "Have you seen any pictures? I have some on my phone." And I said, "No, but I've been very anxious to see some." And so she whips out her phone and she shows me a picture from the book Gender Queer. And she had taken a picture of the book with her phone. And it is, it's a very popular book. A lot of people know about it, but it's a book that the particular page that she showed me was two young children, maybe teenagers having oral sex. So one is giving a blowjob to the other one, basically. And it's from 3 different angles. And my hair started on fire. I could not believe that was in our public library, accessible to 10-year-old children. And I have just been fighting the battle ever since then.
That's great. And I actually have the book right here. It's part of my collection that I've been collecting. So this is the book Gender Queer, a memoir by a person who has pronouns that I think are ear or something like that. So again, further confusing children. What does that mean? If you look at the back of the black cover of the book, says non-binary and asexual coming out to EIR family, EIR family, and society by addressing questions about gender identity. And as people...
Let me tell you the things about that book. Hold it up again so that your audience can see. There is an award emblem on that book. This award was given to the American Library Association. So when I saw that picture, I thought that would be the worst picture I would ever see. I never expected that to be what I now consider quite benign, because I found such content that it's strikingly unbelievable. But the American Library Association gives awards to books, and the more perverted and the more pornographic, the better. And so when you're, just getting into this battle, if you find a book that has awards, be very hesitant, be very careful. Don't buy books for your children because they're award winners, because the award winners are quite deviant. And so, just as an FYI, I had forgotten about that particular book. But yes, so I started, I sent an email. I took a picture. I asked her, send me that picture, text it to me. And she said, I can't text it to you. I'm going to be arrested for transporting in pornography. So I said, okay, put it on your phone. And with my phone, I took a snapshot of it. And I went home and I crafted an email to our Llano County judge and about a little over 100 other people. Now, remember, we're a small community. But I sent it to every parent I knew, every pastor I knew. And I sent it to business owners and others, some county commissioners and the county judge. And I said, we are in a spiritual battle. Satan is after our children. We have to stand and we have to pray. Let's create a weekly meeting in the town square. Let's congregate. Let's pray protection over the children in our community, because that is the only victory we can have is through Jesus. We are not going to ever have victory on our own. And so the other side, so a few months later, Llano County, the judge, all 4 commissioners, the library director, and 4 members of the library advisory board, which by that time, a few months later, I had been nominated to be on the library board by the Llano County judge. Well, 4 of us, there were 13 members of the advisory board. 4 of us were sued along with the county. And we were sued in federal district court for abridging the First Amendment right of these 7 people who sued us. So what I tell people, because they say, who sued you to keep this stuff? In the children's section, by the way. The judge went in after I sent that picture. He went into the library. He and the county commissioners relocated out of the children's section into the adult section. So the 17 books, those 17 books never left the library, right? They were just placed in a more age-appropriate location. So when you have pictures of 2 or more people having sex, those do not belong in the children's section. It seems like common sense to me, but what I've discovered is common sense is not so common anymore. And so we were sued. We were sued in federal district court in Austin. Every judge in Austin is a flaming liberal. So the left, when they sue people, they judge shop. So they find a judge that they know shares their principles, or in this case, lack of principles. And then they're able to get the judgment that they desire, right? And so we were sued. My laptop was taken. My cell phone was taken. They're skimming through everything, trying to find anything incriminating. And all they could find was pictures of porn from books in our library. And so everything was finally returned to me. But listen, I began looking at our high school library that my daughter had just graduated from 2 years earlier. And I found way worse books in my daughter's school library. And I began reaching out to other people that I knew, people in other communities, people that still had children in schools, in public schools, and letting them know what I was finding. And I was finding resources, and I became friends with other women that were doing the exact same thing and taking that to a different extreme. So one of them created a website called takebacktheclassroom.com. And you can go there and you can select your state. She has every state in the United States. You can select your state, and then you can see almost every school district in your state. And so let's say you go to Llano School District, that's where I am. And then you can look at the Llano High School, the Llano Junior High, the Llano Middle School. And you can see some books that are there. It's shocking. She has found like over 1 million books altogether. I mean, multiple copies of every book in multiple schools and all across the states, in every single state. We have not found one clean library. I've been in over 2,000 libraries, not one clean library. And listen, I'm talking even, so I don't know if your viewers might know what Hillsdale College is. Hillsdale College is a great university here in the United States, in Michigan. And my husband and I are big donors to it. We believe in the university and what they've been teaching. Well, I found the very worst book that I've ever heard of. And I thought, no problem. I will call and I will let them know that I have a book that talks about raping and torturing women, and let them know. And they'll move it. I was certain that they would move it. Well, they didn't. It took 3 or 4 weeks, but they finally came back and said, our students are adults because it's a college. And I said, I understand that. But technically, if you look at it through the lens of education, I said, whether your student is a kindergarten student or a college student, when they find a book in their educational institution that they're paying to go to, they expect that that institution has granted it acceptance, right? Approval for that book. And so you have a book that is literally the worst book I've ever seen. And anyway, it's still there. They kept it. So obviously we're no longer donating it to that university. But it's a matter of becoming aware. And so this year I have a verse, a scripture that I've been trying to live by. And that scripture is Ephesians 5:11. And what it says is, have nothing to do with the evil deeds of darkness, but expose them. And so that's exactly what I do. In the beginning, I thought that God wanted me to have the books removed. And I thought that was my responsibility. So I was going around. By the way, I've been to 163 school boards to read porn that is found in their schools, one of them, on one of their campuses or more, in a lot of instances. And so I've been out there, and I wasn't getting the victories that I wanted. And so one day I was kind of like the Israelites in the wilderness and wandering around complaining. And I was just like, Lord, what is it that you want me to do? Because I'm not being very effective. And so I was just whining and whining. And finally, I heard God say, Bonnie, it is my job to convict hearts. It is your job to open eyes. And I was so jubilant because I thought, well, opening eyes is the easy part, right? And so that's what I do. I go around, I do any podcast I'm invited to be on. I will go to any school board where a group invites me to come. I've been working with 4 legislatures outside of Texas to try to get good legislation passed and written into law so that children can be protected. Listen, it's a long-term goal because it's not something that can be easily fixed and quickly fixed. In the beginning, I thought, oh, no problem. I can have this fixed quickly because I'm very focused and very determined. But what I have discovered is that Satan is also very focused and very determined. And this is a spiritual battle. And so all of us who are Christians, and I use that word kind of lightly because I think a lot of Christians have given themselves a bad name. They don't want to step on toes. They don't want to hurt feelings. They think they have to be tolerant of everything. And they're not willing to stand, and this, if you're not willing to stand to protect the minds of children, then I don't know what else is worthy enough to stand for. So I invite your listeners to stand.
Absolutely. Thanks. That's great. I couldn't agree more with any of that. To go back to a couple of things that you said there, I was just wanting to follow up on, first of all, what exactly were you sued for? Or what were the things against you?
Well, the suit was a First Amendment violation. So the 7 people that sued the county and sued me, they sued us for interfering with their First Amendment right to read these books, to have them accessible, which technically they never lost access to the books. The books never left the library. They left the children's section of the library, and they traveled about 35 feet over to the adult section of the library. They never left the library, so they were always there. And so I thought, like within a week or two, or, I don't know how slow the court system moved. I didn't know at the time, and now I do. But I thought within a few weeks that some judge would say, you have not lost the ability to access these books. No one has interfered with your First Amendment right. And so that didn't happen. It took us 3.5 years to win, to literally win in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. They came down and said that any library has the right to remove any book they want at any time they want, literally for any reason they want. And they said something even deeper, and that was that if a library doesn't have the right to remove books, they're no longer a library, then they are a warehouse. And I thought, wow, that's such a common sense phrase, right? I mean, if you allow someone to sue you for removing a book, pretty soon any book that gets removed will result in a lawsuit, because the people that wrote it or the people that want it will start suing and suing and suing. And everyone will be terrified to remove books. And so books will be abundant and overwhelming, and the library will then become a warehouse. And I thought that's exactly what happened. So we won that lawsuit. The 7 people who sued Llano County, after that great victory in May 23rd of 2025, they appealed to the Supreme Court and asked the U.S. Supreme Court to hear their case. And on December 8th of 2025, so just a few months ago, the U.S. Supreme Court came down and said they would not hear the case. And that we are told by our attorneys that happens when they agree with the lower court ruling. They agree that the lower court got it right. They don't need to rehear it. And so that is a victory. Although I'm working with 4 other states on cases where the ACLU, that's a very, very rabid, radical activist organization in the United States. And so they have sued several school districts and even the state of Utah, trying to get these books placed back into the schools and into the public libraries children's sections. So eventually the U.S. Supreme Court will hear these cases, and I expect full vindication and full victory.
Wow, that's fascinating. It's a long battle. It's a long way, isn't it, to get to where you've gotten to already? That sounds like a very long fight.
For sure. But I haven't been idle in this time. I've been traveling around. I've been educating other people. And let me tell you, not one week goes by that I do not find new books, new bad books. And so my list right now has 1,806 bad books on it. And I'm talking about extremely bad books. Like there's a book that I found recently called The Sympathizer. And it's by a gentleman, an author from Vietnam. And the book is about a young boy, 12 years old, who goes into the refrigerator. He's home alone. He finds squid, raw squid. He's got, I think, 6 raw squid in there that somebody had donated or bartered with his mother for. And he takes one of the squids out and he starts ejaculating into it. He starts jacking off with the squid. And he leaves his cum in the squid. And then his mother comes home, she cooks it, and they eat it. And I'm like, what in the world is the benefit of depositing these thoughts into the minds of our children? Because nothing positive comes from content like this. Nothing. There's a book called Boy Toy that I find in so many middle schools and high schools. And the book Boy Toy is about a 12-year-old boy who the first day of 6th grade begins to be groomed, and by Christmas is having a sexual relationship with his 6th grade teacher. And it's in graphic detail about what they do to each other and how she's teaching him. And so why in the world would taxpayer money be spent on this type of content? One of the quotes from that book, Boy Toy, after they have sex, he gets up from the bed and the teacher tells him, "Oh, honey, go into my briefcase and get the answers to tomorrow's test. I don't want you falling behind in the class." And think about how a 12-year-old boy that's reading that might interpret that, right? Because minors' brains are not fully formed yet. And they don't have discernment like we do. And so a boy maybe who doesn't do well on tests or wants to do better, thinking, wow, I wouldn't mind getting the answers to all the tests. What are we allowing to be deposited into the brains of our children? We have to do better. And, I can go on and on. I mean, I have some books here that I will read. I wanted to tell you about this particular book. It's called Let's Talk About It. It's also a very acclaimed book that has won dozens of awards, one of them by the American Library Association, kind of like Genderqueer. And this book award was called the Great Graphic Novel of the Year. So the most prestigious and must-purchase literary masterpieces of the year, okay? And this was in 2022, and it is for 12-year-olds and up, so 12-year-old children. Can I show you a few pictures? I want to tell you first.
Sure, of course.
It was the very first book that I ever found that had a disclaimer on the publisher's page.
Wow.
And I thought, a disclaimer? And it's from Random House Children's Books. So it says, the authors and publisher expressly disclaim responsibility for any adverse effects that may result from the use or application of the information contained in this book. Well, that's kind of perplexing for 12-year-olds, right? The book of the year. Why in the world would it have stuff so bad that it needs a disclaimer? And so, yeah, there's just all kind of stuff here. But I always show this page because at the bottom of the page, it tells kids, remember, we're talking to 12-year-olds here, try sex toys for bonus fun. Vibes and strokers are awesome. So it gives them the name of 2 sex toys to try. And it tells them to try them. And then we go down a few pages later, about 50 pages later, and there's more information here. And the top of this page right here says, a great place to research kinks and fantasies safely is the internet. Well, I dispute that. I do not think the internet is a safe place to be searching for kinks and fantasies. Even tennis shoes sometimes can be dangerous. And so for 12-year-olds, definitely not. But right down here, it says, look up interviews with your favorite porn performers. Go to the sites they recommend and pay for your porn, which is very interesting, right? So why would a 12-year-old have a favorite porn performer? And what kind of sites would porn performers send 12-year-olds to, or anyone to, and then pay for your porn? It gets very demonic. And I go back to my comment that this is a spiritual battle. What the other side is looking for is lifelong consumers of their product. Their product is pornography. Their product is perversion. And we need to do everything we can to stand against it. And so, I mean, you look at these pictures, like it's grotesque. And at the bottom of that next page, it says that, but there is nothing wrong with enjoying some porn. It's a fun, sugary treat. And so, listen, this is the battle that's raging about us and that we are called to stand against. And it's not just us standing. I believe that God is standing with us. And he does not want this content available to children, probably not even to adults, but that's not my battle. But it is a battle that needs to be fought. And so I invite your listeners to join me, because as I said, I have not found one clean library, not even one. So I was at a school board meeting. I don't know if you all have school board meetings in England.
It works differently here, but
it works a little differently.
If you could maybe explain
US,
how it works.
Yes, we elect, depends on the school, but somewhere either 5 or 7 members of the district who monitor and regulate and pass, policy on that school. district, including what is contained in the library. And so I was meeting at a school district one day, and I had been traveling with a group of pastors. So let me tell you, it's very impactful when a pastor stands up against this. And this one pastor from Houston brought another young man with him that I had never met before. And so after traveling for a year and a half with people, you kind of get a feel of what they want to read, because I will read some things in a little bit to your viewers, to your listeners. It's very, very deep and very, very dark. And not everyone can read the graphic sex illustrations. But I asked this new young man, his name's David Stokely, and I said, David, tell me about what you want to read. You know, are you comfortable reading graphic sex, or do you want to read about drugs or, something else? And he said, oh, no, I've been in prison for 10 years, Miss Bonnie. He said, I can read anything. So I said, yes, because some of them won't read the graphic stuff. So I gave him a really graphic, and I'm going to read it to you, the one I was reading to David Stokely. And there were about 250 people present at that school board meeting that day. And he began to read, and he read 3 or 4 sentences. And then he began to weep into the microphone. He wept with such anguish that you knew it was not, pretend. He wasn't trying to win an Academy Award. He was heartbroken over this content. And he told the school board, he apologized when he collected himself, and he told the school board, I have 2 teenage daughters, and this content is directed at them. They are the targeted audience, 12 to whatever age. And so he said, I spent 10 years in prison. He was still testifying to the school board. And he said, this content is illegal in Texas prison. And so after we concluded with the school board, everyone spoke and it was over. He came up to me and he said, Miss Bonnie, I'm so sorry. I totally lost it. And I said, David, you were the most impactful speaker, but tell me about the prison list. And so he told me that any book that had graphic illegal sex acts, so rape, incest, sex with dead bodies, sex with animals, y'all, we have all of these things in our books. I have found 2 books that describe the author, the protagonist of the movie, pretending or fantasizing about having sex with Jesus. If that does not just make all of your listeners so angry, and it's in graphic detail what she imagines doing to Jesus, it's sickening. And so, and dead bodies, you would think that would never be anywhere in a school or accessible to a child. No, we have several. And so the next day I reached out to my state senator, because he is the chairman of the Criminal Justice Committee in Texas. And so I said, Pete, I need this list. And he's like, I've never heard of it. And I said, me either, but it exists. And so within 24 hours, I had that list, and I have found over 200 books on that list in Texas schools. And so what are we doing? We need to stop. We need to reevaluate, and we need to put on our full armor of God, and we need to go to battle.
So if you could read a little bit from that book, I'm sure this will be disturbing for people, but I think it's the only way for people to understand exactly what some of this is. So if you maybe want to read, even the section that made him weep in front of those people.
So I don't have the actual book here. I just have a report that I take and
what is the name?
From. I call it a book report.
What is the name of the book again?
The book is called A Court of Silver Flames. It is a very popular book series by an author named Sarah J. Maas. And I read yesterday an article that she's got 2 new books coming out. All of her books are very, very, have a lot of sex, graphic sex, a lot of perversion. But I'll just read a couple of quotes for you. Page 288. His cock was enormous, beautiful and hard and absolutely enormous. She wrapped her hand around his cock, her fingers barely able to reach around him completely. She licked across his broad head, tongue sliding into the small slit across its tip. She licked up the small bead of moisture already gathered there. A surge of wetness slipped between her thighs as the taste of him filled her mouth. She licked up his shaft in one long motion, rubbed her thighs together as she tasted him, felt all that hard, proud steel against her mouth. She licked down the other side, coating him, making it easier for herself as she put her mouth around him again and slid him between her lips. She wanted him undone, wanted him grabbing her head and fucking her mouth as hard as he would. It was torture, a special kind of torture, to have Nesta kneeling before him with his cock in her mouth and not able to roar with pleasure. But then she stared at him between her lashes, and the sight of her with his cock between her lips snapped something. Cashin slid his other hand into her hair, fingers twining into her braided coronet, and he thrust hard into her mouth. She took him deep and moaned so loudly it reverberated against his balls and straight down his balls. Cashin fucked her mouth, and her moaning had him deciding he'd fuck the rest of her too. That's just 3 paragraphs on 1 page. This book is almost 900 pages of perversion. And it's hard when you're trying to say, okay, what should I share with people? Because there's so much of this content.
So it's
all.
Where in the libraries have you found this in children's departments in the libraries?
Yes. So I have found this in the United States. We have something called a young adult section,
Right.
which is a misnomer because young adult ages are 12 and up. So a 12-year-old is not a young adult. They're not
No.
even teenagers yet, but this book is for 12 and up. Now, I have found this even in the United States, we have 3 ages on campus. One campus is for elementary, which is for 5 years old to 10 years old normally, sometimes 11. So 5 to 11, let's say. And then 11 to 14 or 13. And then high school, we call high school the upper grade. I think y'all might call it secondary. It is for 14 to 18 until graduate. And so some kids start a little later or stay back a year. So it does vary a tiny bit. But I have found this book in campuses for 5 to 11-year-olds. Now, who in the world thinks that that is appropriate? Even for the 11 to 13-year-olds, it is inappropriate. Listen, I'm 58. It's inappropriate for me, y'all. This is not.
Yeah.
This is not what we need to be filling our minds with. And the other thing to always remember is our tax dollars buy these books for public libraries and also for school libraries. So there are wonderful literary classics out there that nurture the mind and inspire children. Why are we putting this type of content? So, yeah, I mean, I have found this in probably 1,900 libraries out of 2,000 that I've been in. I mean, it's almost in every single library. Now, I started a campaign against it, and they have removed, some of them have removed this particular book. But the book is in a series of 5, and it was the 5th book in the series. So many schools still have the other 4 books, which are similar. What I've tended to notice is as authors continue writing and go on and on and on with, subsequent, if it's a series, the later novels, they get worse and worse and worse. So the content, they push the line a little bit, and push the line a little bit more and a little bit more because it's paying for them, right? I mean, they're making lots and lots of money off of this type of content. And having a contract to provide books for schools is very lucrative because there are lots and lots of schools. And if you can get a book or 2 in every single campus, wow, So, and that's how Satan tempts us. Are we going to go down the road of perdition, or are we going to stand for righteousness? And we are certainly not standing for righteousness. What I want to say to your listeners is the Calvary is not coming to save your children and the children in your community. You are the Calvary in your community. It is going to require people to stand, to get informed. I will help you. To get engaged. I will help you. And to learn how to fight the battle. I will help you. And there are resources out there of people that I have become friends with who have websites now with content on there that you can go and look at and get. You don't have to read every book. You can get what I said, a book report, 3, 4, 5, 10 pages of the worst content in that book. So you can read that in an hour or less and say, oh, no, this book definitely needs to be pulled from the shelf. And it may be as simple as taking it from an elementary school, from the 5 to 11-year-old kids, and putting it up in the high school where there's 14 to 18-year-old kids. I don't know what your community standards are. Each community is a little different, but I know with all my heart that this content is demonic and deep and dark, and children should not be exposed to it. So I will help you. I'm not just going to tell you about a problem and then dump you. And so, let me read a couple of other books that I have. This book I also find in lots and lots of places. It's called Dead End, and it's by a writer named Jason Myers. Also, he's written a lot of bad books, and I'll just read a couple of. One thing that I want your listeners to understand is it's not just about extreme sexually explicit content. That's mostly what I focus on, but there is also a very, very heavy emphasis on drugs and alcohol. And, there's one book, I don't have it right here with me, but it talks about how this girl says, oh, I met my new best friend, marijuana. And when I started marijuana, I relaxed and I became more popular. My hair got thicker, my skin cleared up, and she solved all of my problems. Again, think about a child reading that maybe has acne, or she doesn't feel pretty enough or popular enough, which is probably every girl, right?
Yeah, I was there. Yeah.
And so they're reading this book and they're saying, wow, all this girl needed was marijuana. The other thing to remember about these books is when kids or even adults, when we watch movies, there is a human being that is the character. And so we watch the characters interact, and we may empathize or sympathize with them, but we don't become them. But when we read a book, we actually assume maybe it's not the main character, maybe it's a side character, maybe it's the antagonist, not the protagonist, but we actually become the characters in the book. And so that's something to remember. So page 56, and this is the book Dead End, page 56. Have you ever sucked a dick and swallowed the cum before? Oh, okay. She was sobbing and screaming. Oh, sorry, page 77. She was sobbing, screaming wouldn't even help. She closed her eyes and braced for the intrusion. Quit crying, whore, Bo snapped. He turned her on her back, kicked her hard in the ribs. He knelt down beside her and tore open the buttons on her jeans and slid them down to her ankles. Bo slid Gina's underwear to the side and shoved 2 fingers into her pussy. It was dry, so he slid his fingers in and out a few times over to get her crotch moist, his fingers sliding in and out of her pussy. He took out the condoms he always carried. Gotta use these, he told Corey, then kicked Gina's leg. No physical evidence this way. Her word against our word, and my word always wins. I'm smarter than the rest of them assholes. Now hold this bitch's arms down while I make her moan. Bo unzipped his pants. His dick was already hard. He put on the condom, pulled his pants to his knees, and guided his dick into Gina's pussy. Y'all, what are we doing to our children? We find this book in so many schools. And also, that's not to discard the fact that we also find it in the children's sections, because sometimes there's several, of public libraries. Sometimes your tax dollars are paying for 2 copies of this, one for school, one for public library. So we need to do better. We need to stand. We need to stop, speak out, and stop this content. And again, you know, I will help you. There's a series of books called Assassination Classroom. I don't think in the UK you have as many problems with school shootings as we do.
No.
You know, in the United States, and probably part of that is your process for acquiring weapons. But there is a series of books, 21 volumes, called Assassination Classroom. And every volume is about a teacher who brings a really sharp knife or a gun to school to kill all her students, or a student who brings a really sharp knife, because sometimes they slit the throats of the people, they don't shoot them. So they bring a really sharp knife or a gun to school to kill the teachers and some of the students that they hate. And so why in the world do we allow, and I go to schools and they have every volume or some volumes. What are we doing? Even the name, Assassination Classroom, wouldn't that prick your conscience where you say, well, that's probably not a good book? You know, librarians, God help them, because I'm sure there must be some good librarians. I have not yet encountered one, but there must be some good librarians. But all the ones that I've encountered, they fight tooth and nail to keep this content in. And so you have to ask yourself, why in the world are people fighting to keep this content? Because in the United States, the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, monitors network television between the hours of 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. for any content that is profane or indecent. Well, what I just read to y'all is profane and indecent, both, but it only has to be one. And so they will not let anything profane or indecent be mentioned or read or commented on during the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. And if you go to the website, it's because they say a child might be present. Well, guess what, y'all? We know that a child will be present in every school library in the UK and in America, and every children's section of every public library. There will be children there. So what are we doing? Personally, I don't think that adults should be reading this content either. It's very dark and it's very demonic. But that's not my battle. My battle, thank you, Jesus. He gave me something easier. So to protect children against this. And I'm going to read one last book. We get it. I find this book in many, many places also. It's called Triangles, and it's by a very, very, very popular author named Ellen Hopkins. And so many of your listeners will have heard and maybe even read some Ellen Hopkins books. She used to write books about fly fishing and nature, and they are still in many schools that I go to, and very clean, lovely books. But I don't know what happened to her. Something very dark, something very deep happened to her. And now she writes about very violent and graphic sex. So that book is called Triangles by Ellen Hopkins. I'm just going to read you one page. Page 308. Have you ever been tied up? I am naked when he lays me trembling on the bed. I won't hurt you, he says, not if you're very good. He uses my stockings, one for my hands, which he crosses at the wrist, stretching them over my head. The other he wraps around my eyes. Open your legs. His face dives between them, and his mouth claims what he finds there. And when he says, you can come now, I am beyond ready. Now that you're wet, he says, I'm going to do something I've always wanted to do. He slips one finger inside me. 2, 3. At 4, the pressure becomes terrific. But when I squirm, he gives my arms a warning tug. No, hold still. I do, and he works his entire hand into that narrow space. And over the flashing silver pane, I shudder orgasm. That's my girl, he says. I wish I could see his rigid cock fevered and poised to push inside me. One wicked thrust, and I come again and again and again, and now so does he. So we are teaching our children that perverted sex is glorious. And I think that all of us need to stand against this. And so, yeah. Do you have any questions? Sorry, I'm looking at your face.
Yeah, no, it's hard to come, it's hard to, I'm happy that not happy that you had to read from these books, but I think it's very important for listeners to get this into their minds. And it needs to be a much bigger fight. And those examples that you've provided are, as we discussed before we started recording, is that one of the things that I hear frequently is that we are homophobic or transphobic or something but it's much bigger than that. And I've spoken with people who are lesbian, gay, who are just as against this as everyone else. And I think that's one of the labels that they try to do. It's part of the evil side of the battle, that they are trying to say that it is something that it is not. And I think that's the examples that you gave are examples of obviously very graphic sexual descriptions of between male and female.
Exactly.
Which,
that is specifically why I picked, listen, there's an abundant supply. Like I said, I have 1,806 books just like this on my list. Yeah. And so I never focus on the homosexual graphic sex, and there's plenty of that also. Yeah. But I always choose man and woman because I got so tired of hearing, like you just said, they're claiming that we don't like LGBT people and we're going after their lifestyle. This has nothing to do with that. Yeah. That lifestyle and the graphic sex between them is also something that I go after. But if we go after graphic sex and take the homosexual and the heterosexual, both of them out of the library, our children will be in a better place. And so I just never focus on it, but there's plenty of it for sure. Yeah. Listen, I am a Christian and I use that term lightly because I know that Christians have given themselves pretty much a bad name by not wanting to stand and fight for righteousness. And so I just say I'm a disciple of Jesus. But the Bible tells us that we are to be zealous for God. Okay? And what we know from watching TV is the other side is very zealous for their gods with a little g, right? Which are perversion, pornography, LGBT nonsense, transgender, this transgender craze. The left is crazy and zealous for it and will fight forever for these things. And so I ask your listeners, are you zealous for God, for the one true God that we say that we worship as Lord and Savior? Not just as Savior, as Lord. Do you follow him? Do you listen to him? Do you seek him? Do you seek his will when you're making decisions? And so I try to always remember to tell people, one of my favorite Bible verses is Joshua 1:9. I have it right here on my wall, and I have t-shirts. It's on my Bible cover. I see it everywhere I go. And it says, be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged. The Lord your God goes with you wherever you go. But some of your listeners might know that I kind of butchered that. I didn't give you the whole verse because what I gave you is kind of the world's verse. They don't want the beginning of that verse. But the whole verse says, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged. The Lord your God goes with you wherever you go. So it is not, if this morning you wake up and you feel strong and courageous, bold. You can stand up and you can fight. No, it's regardless of how you feel. It's a command from God for us to stand. And I can't think of anything better to stand and fight for than children. And my daughter's in medical school. She's 25. She's grown. But I'm fighting for every child. And even my daughter, when she reached 25 in November, I sent her a text. I said, babe, your mind is now fully developed. And she's like, finally. So her and every child of God, we have to protect them. And so I can give your listeners a couple of websites they can go to. Most of the content is in the United States, but there are book reports like the ones I read to you that you can download for free from both of these websites and start looking for books in your children's accessible to your children. You'll be shocked at what you find.
Yeah, what we'll do is we always do a short write-up that goes along with every interview, every discussion that we have. So we can put those links into the write-up for our listeners so
Perfect.
they can go look themselves. That's a really important thing. And I guess something that, going back to something you said earlier, because I'd like to give people something that they can do, because sometimes when they hear these things, this is horrible. What can I do? I think you said earlier that you've been in over 2,000 libraries. Is that correct?
That's exactly right.
And
it's more than that. I think it's like 2,300 now. But
so
I need to figure out the right number.
So I've talked to people before who say, well, I want to go into the libraries. I want to do something. Because we don't have library boards and school boards the same way here in the UK, and let's say that anyone in any country wanted to go do something, and they wanted to go into their local library, what would you suggest that they look for? What can they ask? Should they hide the books behind the shelves? What should they be doing if they go into their local library?
Well, the easiest thing to do is go online to the public library catalog. So public libraries are proud to put their catalog online because people will, if you live in a metropolitan area and there's 4 or 5 different libraries to choose from, they want you to be able to see if they have the book you're specifically looking for, or maybe the author that you're looking for. And so you can go online and the library catalog is right there. You can search for any book you want. I will gladly share with you, Diane, my bad book list. It changes all the time, by the way, y'all. It never gets smaller. It always gets bigger. And so I was told yesterday, and I ordered the book, but I have not yet received it from Amazon. But I was told about a book of 3 14-year-olds that kill and have sex with a dead body. Three of them together, like a threesome, having sex with a dead body. And so I don't want your listeners to think that these are a few anomalies. They are not. These are mainstream things that are being injected into books that are accessible to children. And there's a book that I have that is for 4-year-olds, and it's called Do Animals Fall in Love? And so it shows, I live on a rural area. We have deer all the time, white-tailed deer in my yard. And it shows 3 white-tailed deer having sex, mating. And so in nature, you will often see 2 bucks with their horns, and they're fighting and fighting and fighting. And sometimes their horns get locked together and they fall down and they die because they cannot get disconnected from one another. They would never, both of them, have sex with a doe. So this picture has a doe on the bottom and then 1 buck on top of her and then another buck on top of him. So a threesome. You will never see that in nature because only the human mind is perverted. But yet, I find this book in so many elementary schools and every public library I go to. In the, they call it the early readers or young readers. In the United States, that's what we call the 4-year-olds. They're just learning to read, so there's mostly pictures. But even for this age, they are infusing it with sex. Why in the world? And the next 5 pages after that picture are the penis sizes of 80 different animals. And listen to me, I've had 2 children. I've had 2 4-year-olds at one time. Neither of them, no 4-year-old has ever asked me, what's the penis size of a, red-nosed monkey or a whale or a rhino, anything, right? Because children don't think about sex. But these books are infusing sex into every level of life. And they want children to be thinking about it. So it is dark, it is demonic, and I call you guys to stand with us. And let's get these books out of your libraries in the UK.
Yeah, thanks. Just to add to what you said earlier, just a bit about drug and alcohol use. There's a group that I've covered recently on UK Column that my viewers might have seen. If not, get to take a look at my coverage of Protect and Teach, which is an organization here in the southwest of England. And their local library, Exeter Library, had an event called Queer Fest, which I covered both on the news program and in an interview. And the Queer Fest event was not even to do with library books. It was just things that they had out on tables in the entrance to the library. And it included things like a song about fentanyl use. And this was an event geared at children up to age 15, I believe it was. So fentanyl use and something that I had never heard of before at my age called chemsex, which is, I had never heard of this before. The illegal drug use between groups that enhances sexual experience. So you're using the illegal drugs, which is illegal in the first place, to have sex with whoever you want to. So again, you don't even need to go into sex or safeguarding issues to see right there that they're already encouraging criminal activity to use illegal drugs to have sex with, whoever is around, whoever's part of the group at the time, essentially, without going into more detail.
That reminds me of another book I have. It's called Suicide Notes from Beautiful Girls. And I find it everywhere. So at a school, why would you buy a book called Suicide Notes from Beautiful Girls or any kind of suicide notes, right? But it's about a 14-year-old girl who decides she doesn't want to live with her family anymore. So she's in Baltimore and she goes to a homeless shelter in Baltimore and befriends a female, it says, about her size and shape. And then after a few weeks, she invites this girl home with her and she kills her and she puts her in their barn and she burns down the barn. And after the barn's burned, she leaves a suicide note, her own suicide note, so that her family thinks that she is dead. And she begins to live off the grid with 5 other 14-year-olds who have done the same thing. So we're going back to the fact that teenage brains are not fully formed, right? They don't have discernment to realize, oh, that'll never work. Like, who's going to pay for the food and who's going to pay for the place they live? And we as adults, we think of these things, but a child, is not thinking of this. And so they begin living off the grid. One night they're having a campfire and they're talking. And the question is, who has offended you in your life? And so every one of the 14-year-olds is answering. When it comes back to this girl, she says, my stepfather. And they immediately ask her, has he raped you? And she says, no. Has he touched you inappropriately? No. Well, what did he do? And her answer is, he always looked at me funny. And so that night they decide that this stepfather must die. And they are talking about how to get into the house. And she's laughing and saying, don't worry. When you pretend to die, you keep the keys to your parents' home. And she said, I can get in anytime I want, and I can get alcohol from the liquor cabinet. I go into the medicine cabinet and I take my parents, and they name a couple things. I don't Valium and I don't remember the names, but she said, I get in anytime I want. And I thought, what are we depositing into the minds of our children again? And so like a week later, they go to the house, they wait for the stepfather, they get him, they wrap him they tie him in a chair, and the main summary of the book is that you can kill your diabetic parents in a manner that is indetectable, and you can get away with murder. And she does. She gets away with 2 murders, the murder of the stepfather and also the murder of the homeless girl. But they take the whole bottle of insulin and they inject it into him. And they laugh, but for 2.5 pages, the kids are laughing about how they've gotten away with murder in an indetectable way. And they do in the book. And so, again, I ask school boards when I read to them, why are we allowing these demonic thoughts to be planted into the minds of our children? And you're right. There's so many books about sex, and it's often sex and drugs. So I focus on the sex part, not the drugs. But there's a book called Tricks, also by Ellen Hopkins. She's very popular, and it tells the main character that they have heroin and crack cocaine, and not to crush and smoke the crack cocaine, but it needs to be injected for maximum efficacy. This is from the book. And I'm like, what in the world? Like, if my kid's using drugs, I'm happy if they're just getting part of it, not maximum efficacy, right? So, yeah, listen, we have a lot of work to do, and you will lose friends. I had to change churches, change banks. I mean, my husband and I have no friends left, but the only friend we need is Jesus. And so I encourage your listeners to look and see, to inform themselves on what is available to their children, to the minors in their community, to their grandchildren. And if they have no children or grandchildren, it does not matter. We are still called to stand. And so the children in your community need protection from this type of content.
Yes, and there are laws in place in the UK. There's safeguarding laws and children's acts and things that are meant to protect children from this type of content. And some parents I've spoken with recently in Protect and Teach, which is the group I previously mentioned, some of them have asked the question, why is it they are protected when it comes to other, films and television shows and video games, and those have warnings on them? And why do the books not? And it's a very good question.
Great question. And one of the things that I try to always remember to talk about is there's many, many books that have been made into movies. But the one I always give is a book called Push. And it was made into the movie Precious in, I think, 1996 or early 2000s. And in order to be made into a movie, so that the movie could be rated R, which is, in mass theaters across the United States and maybe elsewhere, 82% of the sex scenes had to be deleted. Okay. So the book is Push and the movie is Precious, with 82% of the sex scenes gone from it. But the book Push, I find in so many schools, even elementary schools and junior high schools, children 5 to 18 are reading this X-rated book that could not be made into a movie until 82% of it was deleted. And so, we just have to be aware. And it starts with our eyes being open, the scales dropping from our eyes, and God convicting our heart, saying, wow, I need to stand. I need to do something. And children, listen, our children are in crisis mode in the United States. I don't know if it's as bad in the UK, but this is not going to solve every single problem, but it will solve a part of the problem. It's one step in the right direction to prevent our children's minds from being totally obsessed with perverted content. We have to do better.
And this is what the founder of UK Column, my boss, Brian Garish, talks about. And he's been covering these issues around safeguarding children, about the corruption of our children's minds and child abuse situations, children who have been badly abused in all ways possible, which is one of the things that I cover along with him as well, that what happens to children in our institutions, sexual, physical, emotional abuse in schools and residential facilities that has happened here and around the West for many years. And another point that I heard recently, and we unfortunately we need to wrap up here in just a minute, but one of the things that this can seem to lead to, according to a social worker in the UK, is that in the past, if children knew about sex, violence, drugs, that would be a red flag for the social worker to realize that maybe they were experiencing abuse at home or at school or elsewhere, because they know about things that they shouldn't know about at their age. But because they're all growing up now with exposure to this content, that it's difficult to, pull out signs from children who might be being groomed or used for other things or being abused in other ways, because it's something that they're all learning about from a young age. So it makes it much more difficult to do safeguarding and find the children who are going through this, because if they all know about it, then they're all open to.
And your taxes are paying for them.
Yes.
We're paying for the corruption of the minds of our children. Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, as I said, we have to wrap up here soon. But I think, this is an important thing that we'll continue to cover at UK Column. Maybe we'll hopefully stay in touch with you again and see how you're getting on with your part of the battle. And I think it's an important thing for us to cover, because one thing that we can do on our platform is make people aware of the different groups around that are doing work like you're doing. And my hope is that we can work together and link up each other. So we have groups working in different areas that eventually, if we can get more groups in more areas, and then we can all work together, because I believe we have strength in numbers. And it might just start with one person, but the more that it grows, the more we work together, the more that we're stronger. And then we have a bigger armor against I will say that the evil that attacks us through the spiritual battle that we are all facing, and that we all have to eventually take a side on as it continues to come into our world. So thank you again very much.
Yes, well said. That's beautiful. That's right. And listen, we already have victory, right? Because we know the end of the Bible. We have victory, and we're still called to stand. So we stand, and we know that God fights on our side. We're fighting actually on his side. It's not even our battle, it's his battle. And so I encourage your listeners to just decide, okay, I'm gonna join the battle. And like I said, I'll give you plenty of information to equip them. I'll give you my cell number. I'll give you my email number, my email address, and you guys can call or email, and I will equip you, because children on both sides of the pond need to be protected from this demonic content. So God bless listeners, and thank you so much for having me.
God bless you as well. And thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your bravery and your willingness to read that in front of a camera. I've done it before myself, and I know it's not easy, but you are clearly far ahead of me in the number of people you have faced directly with this content. And I don't know if it gets any easier, but the times that I have done it, it is very difficult. So thank you for all of that. It has to be done. And please continue to help, and we will do what we can to support anyone who's fighting this battle. We can use our platform to pull everyone together. So thank you again for your time. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. God bless you.